Hello, MotoAmerica fans. It's time for another episode of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. You'll laugh, you'll cry, and you may even learn something from this unlikely pair and their special guest. The mic is yours, Paul and Sean.
Hello, MotoAmerica fans, and welcome to this latest edition of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. I am the second name in that title, Bice, and I'm joined today by MotoAmerica Communications Manager Paul Carruthers. And Paul, this is our 125th episode of the podcast, which if it were a number of years, I looked this up, it would be called the Quasca Centennial Edition. But thankfully, we do these every week instead of every year. We'd be pretty old by now. So how are you doing today?
You actually looked that up?
Yeah, you know, I'm weird like that.
You know what I did? You know what I did this morning? Because I don't know why. I'm ending up sleeping an hour longer because of the time change, which is okay. Because before I was waking up at 6, no problem, and then now it's turned into 7. But then my voice was like, "Oh man, I sound horrible." So I did what you told me a long time ago. I actually ate an apple. So, and you know what? For some reason, an apple's not really. I don't know. It's not appealing at 7 a.m.
No, I don't know what it is about it. Piece of apple pie wouldn't be bad, but that tart, sour taste of an apple is a little tough the first thing in the morning. There's no doubt.
So I ate the apple as fast as I could, and I think it actually worked a little bit. I think I sound pretty sexy for some reason.
Hey, Paul, I got to tell you really quick. We're recording this on the day after St. Patrick's Day, and so last night, we didn't intend to do this, but my wife and I went out to dinner, and I knew it was St. Patrick's Day, but didn't expect this one place that we went to, which we haven't gone to in a super long time because of COVID, would be completely out of control. But we walked into the place. Actually, we had to wait to get in. We went in, and we hadn't seen these people in a long time, and it's a little bit like Cheers in that, when you walk in, we've known these people pretty well and hadn't seen them. So a lot of them came up to us and were talking to us. Well, it was a complete rowdy mess of crazy St. Patrick's Day people just going crazy from right and left. Some guy, I guess he was maybe doing shots, but every time he took a drink, he would like let out a hoot and a holler. And I was like, I don't know that there's anything Irish about that, but they were certainly enjoying the holiday. I guess people just needed to let loose after, a year of dealing with this COVID thing, but.
Yeah, it sounds like my kind of place.
Yeah, you would have absolutely loved it there. You would have got your Irish on and put away a little of your Australian just to make that happen. So
I didn't even do anything. I just ate at home, and it's kind of one of those amateur nights, where it's kind of, I don't know how much you even want to be out. It's funny to me because it's just all of a sudden, I mean, I know everybody wants to get together and stuff, but it just seems like one of those nights where it's like really crowded everywhere. And if you just go out the next night, it's more fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. And exactly that. We didn't, I knew it was St. Patrick's Day. I didn't really think about it, but Pam, my wife, she didn't even think about it. And then we walked in, she's like, "Oh, I forgot it's St. Patrick's Day." And I was like, well, yeah. So, I asked them everything that they were pouring last night was green. And I said, "Is that coming out of the tap that way?" And they said, "No, we actually put a little food coloring in it." But then we heard that the river in Chicago, they dye green every year. That's got to take a lot of food coloring to dye.
I didn't know that. But you're Irish, right?
Yeah, for sure. Irish, a little bit of Welsh, but mostly Irish.
You're the only Irish person I know that doesn't drink a lot.
Yeah, I know. I'm not a big drinker. I don't know what it is. I think it's my ancestors kind of got it out of me or something. So
I have a good Irish joke, but I don't know if we're allowed to tell jokes anymore.
Well, it depends on if it's a limerick. It's probably dirty. So
no, it's not a limerick. It's just actually a joke. But it's about Irish people drinking. And one time, I in Cycle News, in a response to a letter, the guy was Irish, and I made some kind of reference to the drinking thing or whatever, and he just like scalded me about it. So I've stayed away from that ever since.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
I thought they wore that as a badge of pride in that country. I don't know.
Well, probably for most, but then there's always someone that's a little touchy about it. And
right. hits a little too close to home, so to speak.
Right. Right.
Well, let's talk about the guest we're going to have on today. It's Jayson Uribe, who, Paul, you and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. He's actually currently 21, but he's going to turn 22 just before the COTA test in a couple of weeks. His birthday is on March 27th. So coming up on 22 years old, but given the fact that he's been around, we've known about him, he's raced overseas. He just seemed, I couldn't believe he was still that young. I mean, that's very young in the grand scheme of things. So being 22, starting the year in Superbike with us at 22 is a great age to get really going into the MotoAmerica Series. So with all the experience he's had overseas, and we'll talk about that, for sure, he's at a perfect time to go full in on a MotoAmerica season with Fly Racing ADR Motorsports, Aussie Dave Anthony's team, and he's going to be on a Suzuki GSX-R1000 Superbike alongside David Anthony. It's a 2 Superbike team with their big transporter and big footprint, so it's pretty cool. Let's bring Jayson. Well, Paul, I didn't mean to just dominate that.
It seems like he would be a lot older than that, just because I feel like I've seen him around for a long time.
Yeah.
But then when you think about it, you could see the kid around since he was 16, and that's 5 years or 6 years. But
yeah.
It doesn't seem like he would be that young, and good for him that he is, because it's kind of cool starting a Superbike season on a good team and just being 22 years old, because, sometimes I think these guys feel like they need to be in a rush to accomplish things, but when you're 22 years old, you should be able to settle in and take your time and do a bit of learning. It's funny to me because I always think of him as the guy with the Honda, because there's been times he's just been the only guy with a Honda. And, I always picture him off kind of with his own little team there, and mostly at Sonoma, because that's probably where we've seen him the most. But he's always a friendly kid, and he seems like a really good personality for us to have in our series. So I'm excited to have him for the entire season.
Yeah. Well, let's bring him in. Hi, Jayson. Good morning. I'm glad to have you with us today.
Morning. How you guys doing?
Really good. Hey, Jayson. So one thing that's interesting about you, other than the fact that you're not even 22 years old yet, is I think I may have told you this before, but for some reason, when I see your face on the internet or whatever, or think about you as a rider, I always expect to see somebody who's, not as tall as you. And I'm always amazed at how tall you are. I just don't ever expect it. I don't know if it's because I remember you when you started out racing and you were younger, but you're over 6 foot, aren't you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm 6'1".
6? That's amazing. Wow, that's good. Well, I mean, it's funny about. I mean, we talked to Jake Lewis. I mean, Matthew Skoltz is fairly tall. Nolan Lampkin's very tall. We've got a lot of riders in our paddock, and a lot of riders, in the U.S. in general. I think, I don't know what it is with you younger guys who growing up, but definitely the genetics are working for turning into basketball players. I know it's hard to tuck on a bike, but I think you managed to still do pretty well. Is there any height in your family? Not that I've seen from your immediate family anyway.
No, I think everybody kind of hovers around like the 5'8" to 5'10" area. My mother's side of the family has some really tall people, so I think that's kind of where I got it from. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there are a lot of tall people around, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. Definitely has pros and cons, but we try and make it work.
Sean, I don't think we should feel sorry for him, because he's 6'1", he races motorcycles professionally, and he's a freaking firefighter.
Oh, I mean,
you know what I mean? It's like
totally the bat. Yeah, totally.
Speaking around hovering around 5'8", I think I do a lot of hovering around 5'8".
Or levitating. Jayson, one thing I want to ask you. So we've had riders over the years. One I remember the most, I think, from a few years back is Jason DeSalvo had made a decision to race in Europe and went over there, and then came back and, did some great things in our series. Pre-MotoAmerica, but AMA. We see it. Brandon Posh has gone over to England, and he's going back over again this year. Damian Jigaloff has raced over there, and obviously we've had some guys in the Red Bull Rookies Cup, but there have been riders that go over there and, almost before they really get introduced into America. And that's kind of been the case with you. How did it work, and what made you decide to do what you did with your career in the early days and go over to Europe?
So the biggest thing at the time when we had AMA, the minimum age limit was 16 years old to get into the super sport class. And when I turned 12, I kind of got to this point in my career where I thought, okay, well, I could either spend the next 4 years waiting and trying to get better, or I could go overseas and, cut it with people that are my age on similar motorcycles and try and see where that takes us. So we actually got a chance to go test at the Red Bull Rookies Cup tryouts in 2012. So we did that. We met some people, made some friends. And after that, we kind of put the steps together, and we ended up going over to England to race in the BSB championship for 2 years. And yeah, I definitely learned a lot. And like you said, I see a lot of people nowadays doing something very similar, if not the exact same thing. And there's a lot of pros to that. There's also, like you mentioned earlier, you don't really get your name out in the American racing scene, which is what I'm trying to make up for now. So definitely pros and cons. I learned a lot over there. Definitely attribute most of my riding style to European riding. And I'm trying my best now to take the best of both worlds as far as European and American racing and make them work.
So actually, if you would have been born a little bit later, you would have had the opportunity to race here in Junior Cup, et cetera, which these kids today have. Don't you think that's a pretty big deal for MotoAmerica that we were able to pull that off and allow 14-year-olds to race at our rounds? Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I see that now, and it's a huge opportunity that, not going to lie, I wish I could have been a part of. I think it's super cool to see people that young being able to get onto, professional tracks and being able to cut it with some of the best in the nation and really hone their skills. And I think it's good to have people like Rocco and Damien bring in that international experience. And then you also have people from, South Africa, Canada, all that fun stuff. It's really cool to see different riding styles and just different ways of thinking of how to race people. It's cool to see all that in one spot here in America, and it's awesome. I'm glad to see that we have a feeder class, and I'm hoping to see some good battles this year.
Yeah, Jayson, I want to talk a little bit more about this. So when you went over to Europe, the fact that, your mom went over there with you, your dad, you guys have a family electrical business and your dad was involved in that. So your dad stayed over here and your mom went over to Europe. And, when we would see you at Laguna Seca a few years ago, I would talk to your mom on occasion and, knew that she was very active in your career and in helping you out. And I can see why with the two of you going over there. What was that like? I mean, did you guys have contacts over there prior to this? And, was your mom kind of always there when you were racing? And that's an incredible commitment on her part and yours as well, obviously.
No, for sure. It's definitely a family effort. I could never do this alone. So I'm super thankful to have the support of my family behind me. But yeah, like we said earlier, I went over to the Rookies Cup tryouts in 2012 and met a few people from over in BSB. Nothing crazy as far as like, oh, this guy offered me a ride right away. But just made some friends, made some contacts, and waited a few months, had our first club level race at Wira the following year, and ended up winning that race. Literally that night, driving home from the track, we got an email from a team over in BSB asking if they wanted to, see how we could do in BSB championship. So thought about it, hopped on the opportunity, and we packed up pretty much everything we had as far as racing stuff and decided to make the jump, headed over there. And the first few months were rough. I think the first few months of any change, any move is really going to be, a lot of new stuff. So that was definitely interesting. And we were over there for quite a while, especially in the first year, trying to get stuff figured out. But like I said, learned a lot. Definitely a change getting used to the weather. That was probably the biggest thing. But yeah, overall, I had a good time, learned a lot, tried my best to do what I could with the equipment I had. And yeah, I'm very thankful for the experience.
Now, you could make this comparison, but I know a lot of guys that come over from Europe, they see the American tracks and they're like, whoa, they get taken back a little bit. Not so much now as before because the safety's gotten a lot better and our tracks are pretty damn good at this point. But the tracks in BSB, there's a little bit of sketchiness there, right?
Yeah, there are definitely a few tracks over there that they'll get your hairs up when you ride them, especially when you're going at speed. Places like Cadwell Park, Bolton Park is also a fun track. There's really only one spot at that racetrack that's pretty sketch, and it's just because you're like 2 inches away from the Armco. And at the time I was on a Moto3, so flat 6 gear on a Moto3, like skimming your head on this Armco was gnarly. But yeah, I mean, there's definite pros and cons to everything. Really, every track that I've been to in America has been getting better and better as far as safety, like you said, and just having more of a flow. That's the biggest thing I noticed, especially over in Spain. A lot of those tracks are all about mid-corner speed and carrying momentum. That's pretty much what the prototype bikes are designed for anyway, is just carrying that momentum as fast as you can at all times. And then you get over here to America, and it's pretty much the exact opposite most of the time, as far as, we're trying to get this thing into the corner fast, get it slowed down, turn pointed, and out of the corner fast. So it's a little bit of a different mindset. And, like you said earlier, things are changing. Tracks are adapting to be more worldwide, so to say. So obviously it's hard to say like, oh, American tracks are one way and European tracks are another. Things are getting a lot closer as far as being more similar to each other. But yeah, it's definitely a change. Definitely something that I've had to work on as far as both sides, being able to adjust to more of a flowing momentum style of riding, and then being able to kind of revert back to something that, okay, I have to get this bike stopped, pointed, and shot out as fast as I can. So it's different, but I don't think one's necessarily better than the other.
Now, in recent years, Jayson, with us, it's been great that when we have our kind of West Coast swing, so to speak, in past years when Utah was on the schedule, you would do in Sonoma as well, you would do Utah, Sonoma, and Laguna Seca. And this past year, you went to Ridge and went to Laguna Seca as well. So obviously, geographical location from being in Napa, California, has influenced that racing. But what is the reason that you haven't come out further, like east? You talked about when you signed on with Aussie Dave, mentioned you're looking forward to racing on the East Coast. Obviously must have to do with budget and what you can handle as far as doing a full season. So is that why you focused obviously on the West Coast over the past couple of years?
Yeah, primarily it's just, like you said, location and budget. Another big reason the last couple of years we've had, I wouldn't really call it a contract, but we've had an agreement with Honda as far as we're not necessarily obligated to do the entire MotoAmerica season. Our obligations were to do more club events and to develop tires for Pirelli. That was our biggest priority. So for us, the motivation to make the trek all the way to the East Coast from California was it wasn't there. Obviously we wanted to go and we wanted to compete on the national level as much as we could, but just as far as finances are concerned, it didn't really make much sense.
Okay, so we've mentioned it and you've mentioned it, the Honda thing, and now you're gone to a Suzuki GSX-R1000 with David Anthony's team, and you've had a chance to, I know you've ridden it, I don't know if you've actually raced it, and I think it's at Chuckwalla, but I believe you've raced it as well. Is the bikes a big difference? Is it difficult for you to get used to, or is it something that's coming easy? Talked a little bit about the differences in the motorcycles.
So definitely the first half a day was mind-blowing, and I don't want to say it was night and day. I had to ride this bike completely different. There are a lot of similarities. Most of the things I found were hard to adjust to was the ergonomics. As far as on the Honda, I was much more on top of the bike. The fuel tank was pretty wide. So for me, being able to kind of rest my body on the fuel tank was fairly easy, and I could really rely on that to help keep me up mid-corners, not having to use my arms very much to kind of support myself. And on the Suzuki, especially the first few sessions, I found myself constantly falling forward because it seems like the fuel tank is so much more narrow and flat compared to the Honda. There's just a lot of, I don't want to say wasted space, but just empty space that I have to get used to and get better at using it. So my riding style has definitely changed a little bit from the Honda to the Suzuki just for the positioning of everything. Besides that, small things I noticed between the Honda and Suzuki were, it seems like the Honda was very, very rigid. I always try and set my bikes up very rigid. I try and make sure I have as much grip as I possibly can without coming into chatter issues. And it seemed like the Suzuki was more forgiving as far as I could get away with different setups that I couldn't on the Honda to get different grip, or if I wanted something to turn better, you know, and so on and so forth. We could kind of try more, we could be more aggressive with the setup changes, if that makes sense.
Now, had you raced the Honda ever at Chuckwalla? I mean, do you have like lap time comparisons? Were you as fast or faster on the Suzuki already, or is it not to that point yet?
So I had never actually raced at Chuckwalla before late January when I tested there with ADR. The last time I'd ridden Chuckwalla was actually when I cut my middle finger off in 2015. So it had been 6 years since I'd been down there, and I didn't have great memories of that place. So it was kind of a change to get back there again, but it was good. Definitely thankful for the experience, and I'm excited. I'll actually be on the bike again this weekend at Buttonwillow, so I'm very excited for that.
You know, Jayson, I wanted to ask you about this, and, you know, from talking to riders as much as we do, I know not to ask these kind of things during the middle of a race season, so maybe it's okay for me to bring it up now. You know, like I said, you're still young, and you mentioned that your finger, you've paid your dues in terms of some things with racing. I think a couple of years ago you broke your elbow pretty good and maybe lost a bone from there. You've given it up from that point of view in your career. You know, I'm not trying to imply in any way, shape, or form you're injury prone, but you got to be a tough guy to deal with some of the stuff you already have this early in your life. Can you talk about that a little bit?
No, for sure. I mean, I've been really lucky as far as I haven't had any major injuries, you know, knock on wood. I try my best to not take unnecessary risks, but definitely, you know, crashes happen, injuries happen. The biggest ones definitely being my left middle finger. And like you said, 2019, I had a pretty gnarly high side at a track called Thunderhill up in Northern California, and ended up pretty much destroying my entire left elbow and left tricep. That's actually the reason why I missed the Sonoma round in 2019, because I was still recovering from that. But yeah, you know, I try my best to have a level head when I ride. Sometimes things happen. For instance, when I did my elbow, I was trying to attack a qualifying lap and just got a little bit, you know, over eager, so over aggressive on the throttle, and it bit me. So I try my best to learn from my mistakes. And yeah, I mean, we all try our best, but long story short, sometimes crashes happen, and we go from there.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I always equate this, and I guess most riders do too, but you think about, okay, well, which side it's on? You mentioned it's your left middle finger and your left elbow. Well, heck, that's a lot better than probably your right middle finger and your right elbow in terms of, you know, braking and all that kind of stuff. Do the left arm and hand injuries affect you much when you're riding?
So my left hand, no, not necessarily. Left hand in motocross, definitely, it's annoying, but I don't really need to worry about that. Left elbow is definitely something I've had to really work on and try and train to help improve the rest of my body to compensate for that. Especially on the super bikes, I can usually get like 5-6 laps before my left elbow starts kind of giving out. So trying to make sure I get my forearm stronger and I get my shoulders stronger to help compensate for that has been something I've been working on a lot. But no, I mean, long story short, everybody has injuries. Everybody has something that they're trying to work around, whether it's physical or whatever it might be. I'm just trying to work with mine.
Yeah.
Sean, I got to tell you something. I think I would struggle navigating in traffic down here if I didn't have my middle finger to throw at people. Okay.
Yeah, I use them both on occasion.
What's that?
I use them both on occasion. So yeah, I'd like to have both, actually.
Yeah, and I don't use them. I tend to throw the right one for some reason. Maybe because I'm passing on the left. Although usually I'm doing that when I have to pass on the right because they're in the fast lane going slow. So we'll see. But Jayson, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about the firefighting. I mean, it's pretty cool that you have that as a career, or at least a backup career. how did you get involved in that? Was that something, there's a lot of times when, young boys and stuff, they're like, oh man, I want to be a fireman, or they think fire trucks are cool. Or did it start for you back then? Is that the kind of passion you had for it, or did it come later?
That's pretty much spot on exactly how I was as a kid. I mean, I grew up and I used to live right next to a fairly decent sized fire station. So for me, it was, always seeing the guys going in and out of there. And I just thought, man, that's super cool. And I'd love to get into that one day. And then being in Northern California, we have wildfires pretty much every year now. So in 2017, we had a fairly good sized fire, the Tubbs fire. And that was right next to my home. And that was kind of a turning point for me as far as, I'd love to pursue that one day to, really changing gears and saying, okay, the time is now. Like, I need to pursue this now. And, went through the academy and graduated through that, met my squad mates, so you should say, met my station. And kind of from there, we've just been ticking off boxes as far as getting everything sorted for my firefighting career. And last year we had some pretty big fires. That was, for me, those are my first two. We call them campaign fires. Call them campaign fires because normally you only have one in your entire career or campaign as a firefighter, but obviously we had two. So those were a big learning experience for me. And oh man, the training I do for firefighting actually helps me a lot for road racing, especially in the mental side of things. Because, when you're on a fire line, one mistake and you're done. As far as, not only like, oh, you're done, like you're kicked off the team or something, it's like you're done, like you're stuck and you're fighting for your life. So definitely the being able to handle pressure like that has helped me a lot in the racing side and being more mentally strong, and then trying to be more conscious of my surroundings and just be more aware in general. Something I try and convert over to everyday life, and it's helped me a lot, and I'm very thankful.
I want to ask you some more about that firefighting, Jayson, because for me, I mean, I grew up in a real small town in northern New York, and our town was so small we didn't have a fire department, but the town next door had a volunteer fire department. And a lot of my friends aspired to do that, and their dads were volunteers too. But for me, the interesting thing about this was whenever the siren went off, all these guys would jump in their vehicles from all over the place, and it seems like they almost would use it as an excuse to drive like a bat out of hell to the fire department. There was a railroad track in the middle of the town, and if you hit it just right, you could jump, pretty far. So, they just would go crazy to get there. And I mean, we had all kinds of things. We had firemen's races and things like that on Labor Day and stuff. But is that the same kind of thing? You hear a siren and you jump in your vehicle and get to the station as quick as you can?
As quick as we safely can, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's definitely things that we have as far as, I don't want to say different rules or laws, but certain gimmies, so to say, as far as we can kind of get away with a little bit, but definitely not, we're still following stop signs, speed limits, all that fun stuff. But I mean, I have my pager on me that I keep 24/7, and it's actually funny. My personal truck I've built around fire, as far as it's something now that I can hop into, whether it's 2 a.m. or whatever time, and just go and not have to let it warm up and all that fun stuff. So, yeah, it definitely gets exciting. I mean, like I said, I have my pager on me all the time. So whenever I hear it go off, it's definitely changing gears and saying, okay, let's go. And you get that spike of adrenaline, and it's an interesting experience for sure.
Well, I think obviously being in California, we experience, it's a different fire than what most other places have in the fact that it is like mostly like forest, not forest, but I guess up by you there's forest, but down here it's like brush fires, and they are common. But I think what people don't realize, it's like, I'm sure there's a strategy when there's a house fire, obviously, of how it goes about being fought. But when it's like a wildfire, there's a lot of things that come into play. Like there's certain parts where you let a fire burn, right? Because you're focusing so much on keeping it away from homes that you sometimes allow them to burn. Am I right with that?
Yeah, 100%. A lot of times, like you were saying, for structure fires, we have very specific strategies that we try and follow, not only to mitigate the fire, but, the priority is always, make sure everybody's out of the building. First thing, life safety. And then it's kind of the same for wildland firefighting, whether it's brush fire or forest fire, whatever it might be. You hit it right in the head right there where you said, obviously we have to kind of light fires to fight fire. We call them backfires. And so normally what we'll do is we'll start at the edge of a city or of a town, whatever it is, whatever population there is. We'll start a small fire at the very edge of that population to backfire all the fuel that's between where the fire is coming, where the main fire is coming, and our population. So again, fighting fire with fire, we try and mitigate the fuels, and we kind of point the fire where we want it to go. That's how we get more of a handle on things. But everything is different. Wind is definitely a huge factor in that. Weather is a huge factor in that. So we do the best with what we have as far as conditions, but sometimes, you win some, you lose some, and we just try our best with what we have.
Yeah, Sean, I mean, I'm sure you see it on TV back there when we have issues like this, but it always seems to be in hot weather and with Santa Ana winds that are just howling and hot winds. And it's just, I mean, I feel for those guys so much because they're just, obviously that's how the fires start too, is because of those conditions and things get out of hand. But man, it's crazy to watch what they do. And it's always, it's weird because I think I've seen so many of them and watched them on TV, and it's amazing to me how few structures we actually lose. And I think it's because they do such a good job of letting things go a little bit here and there, but really focusing on keeping the fire away from the neighborhood. So congrats on that, because you guys do a hell of a job.
Oh, thank you, sir. We try.
Yeah, it's, I was going to say back to when I was growing up, my area I grew up in was all farmland. We had barn fires. Those were self-contained. I mean, they were big structures, but they weren't crazy like that. Some of the stuff I've seen, and we've seen your photos and put some of it on social media, Jayson, and it looks like you were literally in the middle of hell. I mean, there's just fire everywhere, and you're wearing all that equipment. It's got to be crazy hot to deal with that. How do you must have to hydrate all the time. Obviously you're in good shape with racing, but being in good shape for being a firefighter is probably important too, isn't it?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, if you aren't able to make it through the days as a firefighter on a fire line, you are going to be struggling as far as mentally, physically, emotionally. I mean, you have to be strong to be able to do this stuff. And everybody tries their best, and nobody can ever give any more than 100%. So we always try and take that into account. But it's tough. Like you said, we're drinking gallons of water every day. The biggest thing that I find is kind of hard to do is to just remember to eat. We don't always have a lot of opportunities to get food when we're out in the middle of nowhere. So trying to pack snacks and whatever we can to just get calories is huge. And on the flip side of that, trying to keep our bags as light as we can so that we can actually hike where we have to go is it's an interesting balance that everybody has their own way of doing. But definitely it can get hectic. I've only really had 2 or 3 moments so far in my career where I've thought like this is really bad. And obviously we try to avoid those, but it happens. We try our best to prepare for those things, but long story short, I mean, sometimes you kind of get the thick of it and you think, man, this is really bad. You just kind of work with the punches and, we go from there.
All right, let's switch back to the racing a little bit. So starting the coming season, 2021, really your first full-time go on a superbike. Where do you obviously look forward and I know you think about these things, but like, do you see like where you see yourself racing, like in the pack, or, is that the battle for 5th? Is it the battle for 8th? Is it the battle for the podium? I mean, realistically, you're going to have to take your time a little bit to get used to what you're doing, but where do you see yourself?
No, for sure. It's definitely going to be a big change as far as getting to know a new bike, new team, and being up with some new riders I haven't ridden with before. I know on the Honda, I could consistently get in the top 10. I know where I'd land as far as times. Most, 99% of the time I knew I'd be somewhere between the 6th and 8th range. And I'm really trying my best to make sure I can get up into that top 5 consistently this year. That's my goal. I want to work towards the podium. I know I have a lot of really fast riders in front of me. So trying to make sure I'm, like you said, pace myself. I really don't want to get hurt. Don't want to throw away equipment, and trying to make sure I, keep my head up, keep pushing, keep going forward. But my goal is to be in that top 5 and be pushing for, top 3 as far as I can.
Also, a quick question. I've never asked anybody that's been on his team, but David Anthony's the team owner and he also races. Is it do you think about like, oh shit, I better not beat the boss, or do you think, oh, I got to kick the boss's ass?
We've actually had this conversation many times. It's funny. He's a really good guy. I'm still trying to figure out where the limit is as far as like sarcasm and comedy, but he's super nice, super willing to work with us and help us be successful. So I think we're both in a good spot as far as we're trying to help each other out as much as we can. I'm bringing him contacts, he's helping me with his, so on and so forth. So we both have an understanding where sometimes it's going to be weekends that I'm going to kind of be mooching off of you and the other way around. So we're trying our best to progress as a package together. And the times he was able to do at Chukwala was impressive, very impressive. So I'm excited to see. We're both going to be riding at Buttonwillow this weekend, like I said. So we're both, we have a good target to aim for, and I'm excited to see how it works out.
You know, Jayson, I totally hear you from your point of view of David Anthony. I mean, I love the guy. He's kind of sparse with his words. He doesn't say a whole lot. You have to look at the expressions in his eyes sometimes. And I like that. He actually, because he kind of keeps me off guard a little bit, but at the same time, I think he knows I'm a crazy person, so that's okay. But it's funny to hear you say that, even within the team. You know, he's a difficult guy to read, and I don't think he intends it to be that way. It's just the way his personality is, but he sure is committed to racing. I'm sure you agree with that.
Oh yeah, no, again, super nice guy, very committed to his family and his team, which I respect immensely. This year, we actually got some more help as far as the management side of things for ADR. So we're both looking forward to the extra helping hand. But yeah, super nice guy. Like you said, a little bit hard to read sometimes, but he's always made sure that ever since we got into this deal with ADR, he's always like, you know, I might be kind of quiet, but don't get me wrong, like I'm not upset. He's trying his best, and I totally respect that. So props to him.
Can you tell us how you got involved with Dave? How it started? Were you somewhere together at a track, or bring us back to the beginning a little bit?
Bringing us back to the beginning. So I've known Dave for quite some time. I wouldn't say that we've been like best friends, but you know, we've known of each other. We've seen each other around for the last few years. So we've talked here and there, and we've kind of gotten to a good friendship. And it was actually 2 weeks after my arm pump surgery I had in December. He reached out to me and he said, hey, you know, what are you guys doing this year? And that's kind of where things started off, and back and forth, hot and cold kind of thing. And then finally decided on a date as far as testing, and that was Chukwala in late January, and everything went really well. We were both super pumped, and you know, from then on we said, okay, let's make this happen. And yeah, I'm excited to be on his team full time this year. I'm really excited.
Yeah, you know, and the thing I want to ask you is, in the past years, as I understand it, you're come from a family and have a family business with electrical stuff. And I say that in a loose way. I don't really know what it is, except I know that you've got some training and apprenticeship in doing that as well. And you did a lot with your Honda in the past, with whether it was a flash ECU or whatever. What do you have in this bike? Who's going to handle the electrical, the data and all that? Is that going to be you, or is there somebody on the team dedicated to that? Explain that to us.
So on the Honda, we had the HRC kit box, which we were super lucky to get from Japan. That was definitely, we had some help from Honda with that one. And trying to understand everything that was going on, to me and our crew, was almost impossible. We were never able to really get to 100% of the capacity of that ECU. But we tried our best, and everybody had a little say in it. We all studied, we all went to classes as far as how to use it better. And like you said, you know, it was me, it was my father, it was my mother, it was our mechanic and crew chief, Kirk, whoever it was, we all tried our best. And now this year we're switching over to Motec on the Suzuki. So for myself and kind of my crew, as far as Kirk and I, we're kind of starting from zero. As far as we've never had any experience with it, we don't really know much about what's going on. So ADR has a mechanical engineer, I should so say. He's going to be our data guy. He's helped us a lot, especially at Chukwala. He was huge as far as helping me to get to know the bike better and being able to get it closer to something that I'm familiar with, and then kind of working backwards from there. So excited to have him on board. He's, like I said, been a huge help, and I'm looking forward to not only his help, but me getting to know Motec a bit better and hopefully being able to understand how to use it in a more efficient way.
One of the things that we pride ourselves on in MotoAmerica is that there are a lot of families involved in our series. A lot of the teams, the riders have their mom and dad involved. I mean, we brought that up when we talked to Hunter Dunham recently with his mom and dad, and we know that's been the situation with you as you've gone along. Now that you're going to be involved with Fly ADR Motorsports, will your parents be still involved in the team? I know maybe when you come East Coast, it won't be that way, but or will they be taking more of a back seat now that you're involved with a different team and all that?
I'd like to say a little bit of both. I'm super thankful for my family support. You know, they've been huge in my career. I'm trying my best right now to take, I don't want to say it's a burden, but to take that extra bit of stress and help remove that as much as I can as far as from the racing side of things. Like you guys were saying earlier, we do own our own electrical contracting business. So we're all hugely involved in that. I mean, that's my bread and butter as far as my career path and stuff like that, puts me through school. So we're all deeply involved, and whenever one of us is gone, it's a big hit on the company. So we try our best to make sure we have at least somebody here looking after everything while I'm out racing, which I'm super thankful for, the help from my mother and father. This year, I think it's going to be a lot less of having both of them at the rounds. I'm trying my best to incorporate my father into more of the mechanical side of things for ADR, just for more efficiency reasons. And it's just really hard to find mechanics nowadays. So I'm lucky that my father is very mechanically inclined. And I also have Kirk, my crew chief, who is a good family friend of ours, and he's helped me out for the last few years. So yeah, we'll see. Time will tell as far as if we get both of them there, but I'm just thankful for the time I've had, and yeah, we'll go from there.
Well, we're getting ready to wrap up here, Jayson, but I've got two quick fire questions, some things that I've wondered about for a while with you. So these are going to come out of left field. But so your family business, the electrical business is called Rock and Sons. Why is it called that? Why is it Rock and Sons?
So my great-great-great-grandfather, his name was Rocky, and he's the guy that originally started the business. And then, 6 generations later, here I am. So wow. The name's just kind of stuck.
That is awesome. I had no idea. I was like, who is your father called Rock? I didn't know the connection there. So, that's excellent. That's a way to carry on that legacy, man. That's really good. Okay. Speaking of that, you've also been very loyal to the number 36. What is the significance of that number?
Oh man. So, my original number was 88. And the only reason that I had that number is so you could see it upside down. So like if I was crashing, you knew like, oh yeah, that's Jayson. Then when I think I was like 7 or 8, we ended up getting a used KX65 for motocross, and it came with the number 36 on it, and I just thought it looked cool, and it's stuck ever since then.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Jayson, we're going to let you go, and we appreciate you being on the show. I think the races that you have been, I think it's very clear how hard you work. I've walked by there several times. In fact, I think it would have been Sonoma, maybe, I don't know, the last time we were there, I guess 2 years ago. And I remember walking through the paddock with Cameron Beaubier, of all people. And we walked by and you were under your awning doing something with the bike. And Cameron said, now that's a guy that works his ass off. People don't even know how hard he works, like away from the track, at the track. So I thought that was a pretty big compliment coming from him. But I've noticed the same thing. I mean, there's obviously a work ethic there that's paid off in multiple careers for you. So congratulations on that. And we look forward to having you full time in the series this year. It's going to be a lot of fun seeing you there and following your progress. So thanks for being on the show. And I know Sean's probably got a little sales pitch for us here.
Yeah. So we got a couple weeks to go before our COTA test, which Jayson and Aussie Dave Anthony are going to be at. So we're looking forward to seeing them on track when they get out there. So with that in mind, a lot of people have asked us if we're going to have any coverage in terms of streaming or TV or anything. Well, unfortunately we're not, because it's not racing, it's testing. But we're going to for sure have live timing and scoring on the website. And that's actually, I enjoy watching that a lot. It's fun to see guys that are going quick and personal bests are quick in a split, and they're coming up on a fast lap. You get to see where everybody's located. All the time without worrying about seeing them on camera. So live timing and scoring, I think, is really terrific to learn some things. Plus, we're going to do our best with our social media and some on-the-scene, man-on-the-scene things at that test to bring you as much as we can from that test. And some of the bikes probably are not going to be in final livery. The riders may not be in final leathers or helmet designs or things like that. But we're going to give you some behind the scenes for this initial test because we've got a little, maybe I think it's a month before we head over to Road Atlanta to start our season. But so with that in mind and that test coming up, please follow our social media channels and definitely hit up our website for the live timing and scoring. And we'll have stories and lots of features about the test, both pre-test, during the test, and after the test. And we'll get to find out about how Jayson's doing in his first test there. So thanks to everybody for that. And I also want to say thank you, Jayson. You know, I've been really excited about seeing you race a full season with us. You've got a tremendous talent, well-spoken guy, and a good writer, by the way. Also, Paul and I can attest to the fact that we've read some of your work, and you do a good job in evaluating motorcycles too. So really glad to have you on, and thank you.
Well, thank you, sir, and thanks for your guys' time, and I look forward to seeing you guys.
All right, you guys have a good rest of your day. Thank you.